So we are live now on Periscope and YouTube. Hello to everybody watching today in clinical research. So this is going to be something in addition to the videos I do where I just interview guests or talk about topics or even record some of the podcasts, which I'm going to do next. So if you're in on Twitter, on YouTube, eventually we're going to get this out on Instagram and LinkedIn as soon as Instagram and LinkedIn open up for this restreaming, but I'm going to be going through the news, what's pertinent in today's world and research. I'm going to try to do it every day, but realistically, early on, it's going to be 2 or 3 times a week, but eventually will be every day. So I'm just going to read through the news, and this is going to be in addition to what I'm already doing. Like I said, I'm doing a podcast right after this, but this is today in clinical research. So we're going to see how this stuff keeps what news in the industry is going on and how it relates to us. So I just go on Google News. Sometimes I'll be prepared, other times I'm not. Today I'm prepared. I have a few stories that I wanted to talk about and actually share my screen with you guys while we talk. But let's see what's actually new out there. And by the way, if you have questions, just chat. Leave it in the chat box. Let me know if you can hear this. I will actually move this to the side so I can see what's going on in the chat. Let's close this. Actually, no, let's keep it open so you guys can see. Okay, so I have a couple stories I want to get into, but this one, brand new. I actually didn't see it. So let's see. Clinical trial solutions account for 40% of global spending on eCOA and eSource and clinical trials. Okay, so let's see what this one's about. It sounds like it is sounds like they're being a little facetious in the solutions part, right? They're making fun of the fact that these solutions count for 40% of the global spending on the endpoints in clinical trials. So the Rockville, Maryland, a great place. I've been there once. The latest fact MR study indicates health facilities, contract research organizations, and educational and research institutes collectively spent 1.95 million, 1 billion, looks like, on eCOA, eSource, and clinical trial solutions. Okay, rapidly expanding development of clinical trial solutions, which contributed to 40% of the total spending in 2008, will continue to appeal a widening bandwidth through 2029. So this is a good time if you are a clinical research vendor. Okay, EDC, eCOA, which is electronic clinical outcome assessment. It's also ePROs is more commonly what it's referred to, patient-reported outcomes. So for those that don't know what these actually are, these are things, and I want to see your comments in the chat. I want to know what you're thinking about these things right now too. Patient-reported outcomes is a big thing when it comes to studies. These are everything's moving electronically. eSource, one of my sites is actually switching to eSource. We use Creo, clinicalresearch.io. There's so many different vendors, right? There's patient recruitment vendors, which I don't even think they get into here. So all these vendors, labs, eConsent, eSource, eReg, ePro, IWRS, EDC, they all account to 40% of global spending on clinical trials, right? And these are the quote unquote solutions. All right, so we have this is a good time to be a vendor. It's a good time to be a middleman, like a CRO. A lot of the CROs now, I know because I have a very small startup CRO, and we know what we spend on these vendors, and it's ridiculous. Most of the money goes to the vendors. So that looks like it's going to continue for the next decade. Look, a long-term outlook, okay? This is going to grow 14% through 2029, all right? And the 2019 is the busiest year we've had so far. Let me know what you think about this in the chat right now. Just an interesting story I wanted to bring to you. Another one. How do you view the integration of clinical research with clinical care, and what approaches align to make clinical trial potential care options? This is from Life Science Leader. It's a good publication online. for executives in the life sciences space. So here they're interviewing some guy, Kenneth Mott, president and CEO of Cognition Therapeutics, 30 years of experience building biomed companies. So look, when people like this, all right, and by the way, if you ever go to DIA or Bio, not so much SOCR or ACRP, but like those big meetings, like the one I just came back from, DIA, Bio, you're going to meet people like this guy, all right? And they're from everywhere. And they're all talking about, there were a couple themes at DIA, and that's going to continue. 3 years ago, it was all about risk-based monitoring. Now it's all about virtual trials and site networks. And how do we integrate real-world clinics that are treating patients? How do we somehow integrate research into that? And that's what they're talking about now. And whether that's going to become something reality or not is left to be seen. But this is what's going on, right? There's a growing interest in using real world data and evidence. And a lot of times with these things, when you're reading these kind of things and you see this one short, it's just like an opinion piece. But we can Google and find, I mean, look, this is today, all right? We're going to go through some of these stories, right? You got to read between the lines because a lot of these people at these companies, they're saying things, but they're like saying it in a code, all right? So when they're saying this kind of stuff using real world data and evidence, what they're trying to say, at least in my opinion, and this is all opinion, that they don't need sites as much, or they would like to find a way to bypass relying on the sites for their data, which is not a bad idea for the pharma. I mean, that's like the last story, okay? 40% of global spending goes to vendors, while the rest goes to the sites and the CROs, right? And the patients, which is 60%. It should actually be more like 80-20, 80 going to the sites and CROs and 20 to the vendors. But right now it's 40 and it's going to increase. So as these vendors become more powerful, see all these stories kind of integrate. As these vendors become more powerful, and they actually, here's the thing, if these vendors like eCOA, ePro, patient recruitment vendors like Accurian, or there's other ones out there, if they can reach the patients, okay, if they gain some kind of influence, which, by the way, if you're a site and you're watching, they are a long way from it. I don't even think they're ever going to pull that off. I think patients always are going to rely on their physician for clinical research recommendations, right? Meaning most patients and their physicians never even have a conversation of clinical trials. But if a physician happens to be a PI and one of his patients happens to be a potentially good candidate, and that PI recommends his own study to that patient, there's a very good chance that that patient is going to join that study. There's a very low chance that a patient or the right patient is going to see an ad on Facebook, click on it, and then show up at the clinic, right? There's still a lot of barriers there, but basically, if these vendors get good at kind of getting to as much influence as the physician has on the patients, then they're going to have some leverage, and then these things kind of make sense. So let's just read this and read between the lines just so you can see kind of what's going on. So in the drug approval process, blurring the lines between clinical care and controlled randomized trials, okay? I mean, we can even stop reading the article now. This is what they want to do, right? Now they can't because it's the only thing they can do is like retrospective chart review, which is looking at charts backwards. But even then, you need consent from those patients, right? So the FDA has issued initial guidance in this arena, and many organizations are considering the potential for pragmatic randomized clinical trials. Claims, or EHRs, electronic health records, are now incorporated as part of the comparator against the experimental medicine or new procedures. Okay, so they're going to use the EHR as the control group, and then against the experimental medicine or the new IP. So, but you're still going to need the consent from these people, right? It's just now you don't have to randomize them because they're already doing whatever they're doing. They're seeing their doctor, and this is ties into the virtual clinical trials. And as we start doing more and more of today in clinical research with Dance Fair on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, we're going to start seeing more of this stuff, I guarantee. Okay, so let's see what it says. Over time, there is likely to be increased utilization of observational studies that will be used in development and approval process. See, prospective data collection through registry studies. The issues as this process evolves are to ensure that relevant questions are asked and that appropriate data is collected and analyzed. New digital technologies will certainly increase the abundance of data that contributes to this project. So right back to this, okay? This is increasing. This number is going to be close to 50% by 2029, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means it's aligned with what this is saying. New digital technologies will increase the abundance of data that contributes to this process. Again, it's just my opinion. This one, we can't even read it because it's an ad blocker. So I'm going to move on. But I think there was a good Alabama.com. Let's see if it lets me read. Okay. Aclinet, no, we're not going to read that one. There's too much pop-ups. Okay, here. This is actually better. Ties into this. And I didn't plan for them to tie in, but you see, once you start learning more about the industry and learning about the higher level things, and this is what a lot of you people, we need to see some stuff in the chat too. What do you think about this stuff? Am I out in left field? What's going on? Is my chat not working? I don't know what's going on. But as you start learning more about these things, you start seeing how they relate. And the problem with most people in clinical research is that they hyper specialize. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's where everyone needs to start. You're going to start as a specialist. You're either going to be literally like a regulatory specialist, a study startup specialist. Some of these things are even in the job title itself, the word specialist. A coordinator, a CRA, a PI, these are all specialists. But if you want to become an entrepreneur in this space, if you want to become an independent contractor, if you want to build your own brand and you want to be this guy, all right, like you want to be a key opinion leader, you need to be a generalist. This guy is not a specialist. He started as a specialist. Look what he's talking about now, right? You can't be more generalist than this. He's looking at the forest, not the trees, right? And some of us are over there looking at a bug on a leaf on a tree. Like, we need to expand, and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this live stream today in clinical research. So just something to keep your finger on the pulse of the industry, okay? So here, ties into it. What are virtual clinical trials? An interview with Science 37's Jonathan Kotler. I think we're going to have an interview with these guys. If these are the same guys I'm thinking of, we're supposed to have an interview with these guys for our meetup in Southern California on September 6th. Link will be under the description in the replay if you're not watching live. If you're not watching live, you need to hit the bell on YouTube to get alerts when I go live. Matter of fact, if you're on right now, hit that bell and also hit the like and let me know. Yes, I can see. Thank you very much. Keep them coming. This is the first time I'm using Restream, and eventually it's going to let me connect LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. It's only letting me connect my personal account, which I have a page, so I'm going to probably get the better version of this so I can stream to those things. But yes, I can see. So what are you thinking, guys? Hit the bell, hit the like, comment, and then let me know what you think about these things, okay? So virtual trials. Okay, here's an interview with Science 37's Jonathan Kotler. You think this guy's a specialist too? I mean, he probably is now. He's one of these guys. This company, Science 37, is one of these, accounts for one of these guys, okay? Vendors. Never been a better time to be a vendor in the space. At DIA, when you walk around the exhibit hall and you see all the booths, a good 60% of them, all right, a good 60% of the booths were vendors, right? So just something to consider as well. The majority of clinical trials are conducted at major research institutions or clinics, often based in urban areas. I am a huge fan of rural. If you're going to open up a research clinic, much less competition there. This can create problems of accessibility for many potential patients who live more than 2 hours from a trial site, see, rural, or have work or family responsibilities. In early June, the FDA issued a draft guidance on improving the diversity of patient populations in clinical trials. The biggest focus is on getting sponsor companies to include more historically underserved populations in clinical trials, including women, the elderly, and minorities. The 18-page guidance makes numerous recommendations, including enrichment, inclusive trial practices and designs, and methodological ways to bring patient population. This is a fancy way of saying, how do we get more patients, and then how do we not rely so much on the sites, right? So one of the first recommendations under make trial participation less burdensome for participants, which fits into the patient-centric narrative that pharma is pushing, is to take into consideration recruitment challenges that might be caused by a planned visit schedule. So see, their thesis to somebody who doesn't work in the industry makes sense, but to somebody who works in the industry, it makes no sense. And let me explain. So they're saying their main argument, and by the way, I'm not against virtual trials. We are doing a couple of projects with some big CROs on virtual trials. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's going to expand the pie. I think it's going to expand the opportunities for clinical research sites. Let me know what you think in the comments, and make sure you hit that bell and you hit the like button. Let me know. I think virtual trials are going to provide more opportunities for physicians, all right? I think the way research sites are going to get paid is going to change. I think we're going to need just as many, if not more, CRAs. More of them will be remote. But I do think we're also these virtual trials are going to allow pharma and biotech to decide more strategically, okay, which IP do we want to actually do a traditional clinical trial on? So I think the number of traditional clinical trials, as long as the economy is good, is going to steadily increase over the next few years. And I think that the virtual trials is going to explode, all right, because we're going from virtually zero to it's going to be a couple hundred virtual trials, if not a couple thousand, right? Right now on clinicaltrials.gov, well, we'll get to that later. I don't want to get too sidetracked. We're going to get to that. But basically, look at their premise, guys, all right? The first thing they say, to take consideration recruitment challenges that may be caused by a planned visit schedule. So their thesis, which is spoken like true people who don't work at a clinic ever, is that patients don't join clinical trials because they live too far from a clinic, right? And that is true, but the real that maybe accounts for like 2% of why patients don't join clinical trials. The other 98% is a huge negative stigma surrounding clinical trial participation. I mean, whenever you bring up clinical trials to a person who has no idea what that is, they're going to say guinea pig, lab rat. They just talk about things that are negative, and that the industry has a much bigger problem than getting a patient who's 2 hours away to go to a site. If somebody wants to go to a site, I know patients that take airplanes to get to sites, and sponsor pays for the airfare, right, and the hotel. I know sites that Uber. Matter of fact, yesterday at my clinic, we used Uber Health to get a patient 2 hours away to come to our site. So this is true, but it's also deceiving, because the 98, it doesn't tackle the real problem, which is clinical research has a branding issue. I need to know your thoughts. I need to know what you think. From a human subject perspective, this doesn't sound like the IRBs would be on board with this. Does that make sense? Yes, and that's a whole nother topic. The IRBs are on board with this, and actually there's another story about IRBs, which I'm going to get into. And then once very interesting. This one here, I'm going to get to that. The IRBs is an interesting thing, and I don't want to get in trouble, but let's just say that they're the ones that are getting paid by drug companies, right? Like they're a vendor, they're a necessary vendor. The main concern with virtual trials is not so much patient safety. The main concern really is what kind of assessments can you actually do? And yeah, you could send a nurse to do the blood, and IP can, like, the logistics could work out. The reason why I don't think it's going to work, virtual trials, is because clinical research has a branding issue. Research naive patients are going to listen to their doctor and not going to listen to an ad that they see. And this is how they're getting patients right now through these virtual trials. Now, what a lot of these virtual trials, I'm working with some CROs right now, what they want is they want to appeal to physicians, okay, like maybe research naive physicians. They want to basically get one PI in each state. And remember, these are all studies they would have never done if it wasn't for this technology. So this is not shrinking the pie of opportunities for research sites. This is actually increasing it. So they're going to do like thousands more studies every year because of virtual trials. They want to have one PI in every state that is virtually seeing the patients and virtually monitoring their lab results. The nurses go to the patient's house, draw the blood, the EKGs, same thing, the vital signs. The IP gets shipped to the patient. Compliance can be done with technology. So that's fine. But getting the patients interested, all right? The patients, if it's a virtual trial, the patients don't know that doctor, all right? The patients, first of all, need to trust whatever company is telling them about this study, which pharma is like one of the least liked brands out there, right? Even we got a lot of people like this topic. Even the primary physician of the patients are not fully aware of clinical trials and influence the patients. Exactly, which stops them to participate. Yes. So even the primary care, like they could be a roadblock because, and we come across this too. So virtual trials, I think is a pipe dream. I think a lot of vendors are going to get really rich. I think these Life Science 37, they're doing really well. Pharma obviously wants this. They're investing enough of their resources into this to the point where big CROs are actually taking this seriously and actually they're working with us on doing this. But I don't think it's going to replace the traditional trial ever. I think, well, anytime in the next decade at least, I think it is going to create interesting opportunities for research naive sites or sites that want to kind of begin to specialize and maybe evolve into a vendor. I mean, look, they count for 40%. These are the vendors. Eventually, they're going to account for 50%. I mean, as soon as it's 51%, it's going to make more sense for a PI to want to be a vendor than to be a site. Let me know what you think about that in the chat. But you guys are bringing up good points on there. Okay, so we can get into the guidance. Let's see what else. I love pharma speak. So the guidance states reduce the frequency of study visits to those needed to appropriately monitor safety and efficacy. Okay, here's where they get into this. Flexibility in visit windows, electronic communications, email, social media, or mobile technology can be used to replace site visits and provide investigators with real-time data. Okay, good. But it still doesn't answer the question of how do we get patients aware of the opportunities and trust whoever's talking to them about research, because what the guy in the comments said is exactly right. Okay, they want to talk to their physician, right? And if the physician is against research, they're not doing it. If the physician is for research and has a study, they're doing it. So that's the real issue. That's what DSCS CRO is actually built on, even though at the same time we're investing in virtual trials because there is opportunity there. I mean, look at this, guys. This is maybe the highlight of the day right now, right? 40%. When I started in this industry, it was maybe 20. This was in 2005. All right. Clinical trial solutions account for 40%. By 2030, it's going to be 50, if not 60. It's going to be much more profitable if you're a business person to be a vendor rather than a site. Or will a site become a vendor? Is that the evolution? Let me know what you think. Will sites become vendors at some point? I know they're vendors now, but will sites, let me know. Also hit the bell. Make sure you like. I'm going to start doing a regular schedule. Hit the bell. Make sure you like. Get alerts of when I go live because stories like this come up all the time. All right. So this guy, a generalist, okay, chief medical officer, technology enabled, virtual trial company. Biospace is the one who's the publication here. And I'll interview them at some point, I think. So we're not going to get into all this, but that's basically what from that, what's interesting. All right. Top hospitals for clinical reasons. No, let's get to this one first. This one, somebody was talking about IRBs. I think this one's interesting. And let me know your thoughts, okay? Let me know your thoughts in the chat about, will sites eventually evolve into technology vendors if virtual trials, let's say right now virtual trials are very small. I would say 1%, maybe 2% of the overall market share. Look, let's go to clinicaltrials.gov right now. Let's search for, in the United States. All right, let's start over so we can see this. All right, I'm gonna go in the US just right now. Just in the US, what's recruiting and not yet recruiting, okay? Not ongoing studies, just what's recruiting and not yet recruiting, all right? In the US, let's see how many studies, okay? We have 23,000 studies just in the US right now that are recruiting or not yet recruiting, all right? That's not to mention the ones that are enrolling, active, not recruiting, completed. Okay, these are just recruiting, not yet recruiting, 23,000, right? From these 23,000, I would say 1%, so 236 are virtual trials. And maybe even that is an exaggeration. Okay, so I don't think it's going to pull up if I just put virtual, but let's see. Virtual trials in the United States, 641. Okay, so 246, 3%, 3%. Okay, so 3% of all the studies right now have the word virtual in it. Okay, so maybe from those, half of them are truly virtual trials. See, this one's virtual reality training for schizophrenia, virtual assistant for plastic surgery. So these are not all of these 641. So I think my number is still about accurate. About 200 are probably true virtual trials. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What's going on? Watching from the UK, how's it going? I just watched a 20-minute video on Brexit. Very interesting. Okay, this person, I think corporate sites or those companies that are buying up individual sites will want to get on board with additional services. Yes, and speaking of IRBs, okay, so I'm not gonna mention names, but a lot of vendors, okay, these guys keep coming back here, are buying sites. A lot of IRBs have sites. A lot of CROs are starting to invest in sites, right? So it's just interesting to keep track of this stuff as it progresses. But let's get into this article because I thought it was interesting. This is from Stat News. Amid rising concern, pay-to-play clinical trials are drawing federal scrutiny. All right, so these are studies where they're experimental. So usually it's doctors or like scientists figure out something or have an idea and they think it works, but they're not really allowed to do it on their patients because it's experimental, right? So they have to do a study. So one of the loopholes is you can do a clinical trial. Now, these things cost money. Oftentimes it's not cheap. So IRBs are allowing these investigator-initiated trials, and not all of them operate under this model. Some get grants from the pharma companies or the NIH, but some do. So let's read this, okay? Michelle, this lady has spent 23 years working in the world of IRBs, which decide whether to greenlight clinical trials. And all that time, she's never seen quite so many proposals as she has in the past year that rely on an unusual and controversial funding mechanism. Some planned to ask participants to pay $7,000 to enroll. Another wanted to ask for $250,000. In each case, there were serious concerns about how ethical it was to charge people to participate in research and whether it was necessary. The studies have caught the attention of federal regulators. The Food and Drug Administration recently asked to consider how the research community should think about such trials. Okay, members of that panel are now drafting recommendations, so it's up in the air. And the NIH asked the committee to consider whether its existing resource guide to patients considering clinical trial are adequate for scenarios in which they're being asked to pay. We're going to start seeing a lot more of these because right now we're entering the age of individualized medicine, personal medicine. Um, right now in research, if the IRB approves it, you're good to go. But now the regulators are going to look and see if more regulation needs to be placed on the IRBs and on these particular type of studies. But for right now, it's like the Wild West. And it's not like all of these doctors are doing this to make money. Like, I know some doctors doing this right now, and they're charging what it costs for that actual procedure. Like, they're not making a profit from it. They're just doing it to get the data so that they could send that to an investor later and say, hey, this is the data we got from our pilot study. We would like to fund a real clinical trial now, that's FDA regulated and all that stuff. So let me know what you think about this. But the good news is there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you if you're someone in the industry, if you're someone watching. India, this is great. Think of how this can work there. Okay, so um, a lot of these people. So what was I saying? Okay, as far as the opportunities are concerned, if you're someone looking to be a CRA, let's say you've been a coordinator, or let's say you are a CRA and you're looking to be a consultant, or whether you are a CRC and you're looking to be a consultant, you need to network because this is a new trend, okay? Pay to play. You've learned two new trends here. Virtual trials, right? Vendors, I guess it's the same thing. Maybe three new trends. So vendors, increasing role of importance and influence, virtual clinical trials. And remember in this one, the big issue was patient recruitment. So that's a fourth opportunity for you. In this one, pay to play. So a lot of regulations coming down with this, right? They need, these people running these studies are going to need guidance from an expert, from a consultant. I'm doing this right now. Like, we're working with this. We're working on a project. What was this? I mean, this is kind of something that you can say every study has this, but this is not a serious opportunity. We're working on this, all right, and we're working on the recruitment aspect too, and this now. So there's opportunities if you want to grow your career to learn about these things. Like, look at all these links, okay? Click on these things, read, follow up with what the FDA says, okay? Talk to IRBs, network with people. You're going to find doctors dealing with these kind of things, and they're not going to know how to handle it, nor do they have the time, which is perfect opportunity for someone who wants to be a consultant, or somebody who wants to be a contractor, or someone who wants to be a one-man or one-woman CRO to work on, okay? So I can get into all this, uh, but it's here. Okay, so that's that. Now, I guess we can end it on that. We can have much more tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Like I said, eventually I will make this a regular thing, like every day. But right now it's going to be a few times a week. Today in clinical research with Dan Sfera. Remember to hit the bell, hit the like, and let me know in the comments what you think. And then stay tuned for my next podcast coming up. I'm going to do a podcast, so go to iTunes or Stitcher. It's going to be exactly about this last topic, how people who are already CRCs or CRAs or PMs can transition into becoming contractors and consultants and really make the big money. Basically, how to get from being a specialist to a generalist. All right, from a specialist to a generalist. Think of how to do that and make sure you get alerted. So hit that bell, hit the like, listen to the podcast, and stay tuned for my future streams on Today in Clinical Research with Dan Sfera. Take